That was my third sprint triathlon. This time I shaved 34 minutes from my previous total time. It was a beautiful and a sunny day, perfect for swimming, biking and running. I still attend events like this with a mountain bike. This video is also a comparison video between two popular triathlon watches, the Coros Pace 2 and the Polar Vantage V2. The Coros Pace 2 is much more affordable, while the V2 is a more high-end product. But does more expensive means better? Let's find out. First, let's have a look at some footage from the race. If you're more interested in the comparison between the Coros Pace 2 and the Polar Vantage V2, feel free to use the chapters down below and skip to the part that you desire.
פעם הבאה, נפל לכביש. כן, תחרות שנייה, בסדר.
Hi guys and girls, I'm Yair and welcome to my channel. This channel is all about my personal fitness journey and the tech that I use in it. If you find this video useful and entertaining, please don't be shy and hit that like button. It means a lot to me and I will appreciate it. Also, I need partners to join me on this fitness journey, so it would be great if you'll subscribe and tell me in the comment section down below I've joined. I promise to answer to each one of you. So yeah, my total time for the first sprint triathlon was 2 hours and 22 minutes. This time it was about 1 hour and 48 minutes. Quite a big difference. Even though it was a hot summer day here in Israel, I felt strong and capable. I could push myself in all three parts of the race. Both watches have performed well during the race, but I have some complaints. First, from some reason, the Polar Vantage V2 recorded my riding as a run. A thing that later affected all of my higher scores and stats in other platforms such as Strava and Training Peaks. I can change it now in Polar Flow, but I need to do it also in each of the other platforms as well. Second, the navigation during the race in the Coros Pace 2 is much smoother. You're using only the digital crown button and there is an icon which guides you what is the next phase. While in the Polar Vantage V2, you need to use the red button and the bottom left button to stop. Also, you don't have a clear indication that now you're in a transition time. You'll only be notified when you'll press the stop button and move on to the next phase. I found it distracting during the race. Also, the thing with the running instead of biking, I think it's because that each part of the race can be configured in real time. That's not a neat feature. Even if it looks nice on paper, I prefer to set the sport modes up ahead and not to deal with selecting sport profile while I'm racing. Therefore, in this section, we have a clear winner. The Coros Pace 2 is much smoother, easier to navigate, and the whole implementation of the triathlon profile is better in my opinion. Comfort aside, how both of the watches performed during the GPS tracking and heart rate monitoring. I also wore the Polar Verity Sense for the whole event to get more accurate heart rate data as the baseline. Let's look at some open water swimming data. So from some reason the Coros Pace 2 I probably started here and then I only started to measure when I was in the water. By more or less I finished at the same spot. We can see in red the polar varity sense. I think it produced more like a reliable result. You can see that because it was an open water swimming, I don't really swim in straight lines. I know that the Coros Pace 2 is not so straight, but here is the first buoy, and you can see that I'm really passing the buoy and crossing it like a normal swimmer. And in the Coros Pace 2 there is a very sharp angle here, and I don't think that it's correct. And again, in the second buoy, I think I deviated a lot here. This part I give to the V2 because I remember that I just deviated from the course, and I lift my head and I saw that I need to go back, and this is really reflecting my feeling. So I would give the swimming data to the Vantage V2. I think it was more reliable when I was swimming. If we look at the heart rate data, there is no clear winner here. The polar varity sense measured much more higher heart rate all the time. The Coros Pace 2 really wandered around. Here I had 179, and for instance here I had 107, while the Vantage V2 and the polar varity sense measured the same result. So again, I will give the winner to the Vantage V2, but there is no clear winner with the heart rate monitoring while swimming in the open water. Let's look at some cycling data. You can see the Coros Pace 2 in blue and the Polar Vantage V2 in red. So from the beginning you can see that the Coros Pace 2 have a lot of deviation. I don't really know what happened here. It looks quite strange. And during the course you see the roundabout here. The Coros Pace 2 just went straight to the roundabout. Probably I would get a fine if I will do that. I will destroy all of the plants. And the Vantage V2 has a really nice curve. And again, if we'll look at another roundabout, you can see I probably had a deviation to the fields here, while the Vantage V2 produced much better results. Also on the other side when I returned. And here you see that I'm just wandering around. I'm not even next to the road. Again, a roundabout, the Coros Pace 2 had some difficulties here. And here as well. See another roundabout. Here the Vantage V2 probably also missed, but it wasn't a large deviation like you can see with the Coros Pace 2. Again, the Vantage V2 produced really nice results in the roundabout, while the Coros Pace 2 wandered all over the place. And again here, let's look at some heart rate data. So it took a while for the Pace 2 and the V2 to catch up. After a while, the V2 and the Verity Sense were quite similar, where the Coros Pace 2 had measured a really low heart rate. Here, all of them are more or less at the same spot. Here, the Coros Pace 2 and the Verity Sense were more similar. In other cases, they were spot on. And the Coros Pace 2 had a strange dip again. But in most cases, both watches produced a very accurate result. If I would go for the winner, yeah, the V2 is the winner here because you can see the dip here and the dip here, and it looks like that the Verity Sense and the V2 has a much similar results in the heart rate data. Here you can see some running data. You have the Coros Pace 2 and the Polar Vantage V2, while the Polar Verity Sense is set here as a benchmark. The total duration in both watches is almost the same. The distance is exactly the same. Let's have a look at the GPS tracking. So you can see the Polar Vantage V2 in red and the Coros Pace 2 in blue. Most of the cores they were okay, but you can see those deviation in the Polar Vantage V2. I don't know what happened here, but you can see also here there was a very strange deviation. And if we look a little bit further down the road, here you can see that the Coros Pace 2 have performed really poorly, because here we needed to turn around and do another lap, and the Coros Pace 2 thought that I was just next to the beach. But in most cases, the Polar Vantage V2 have performed poorly in this case. Let's look at some heart rate data. Okay, so in the beginning, you can see that the Coros Pace 2, the Polar Verity Sense, and the Polar Vantage V2, it took a while, I think, for the Verity Sense to catch up. After a while, the Polar Vantage V2 produced a little bit higher results. There are some deviations. In this case, the Coros Pace 2 has a spike up and the V2 and the Verity Sense are very similar. And in another case, you can see that the Pace 2 and the Verity Sense are similar, while the Polar Vantage V2 have some spikes. But in other cases, you can see that the Polar Verity Sense and the V2 are much more close. Here you can see some other spikes as well. Here the Coros Pace 2 and the Verity Sense are similar, while the Vantage V2 produced much higher results. But the trends are more or less the same. Both watches usually counted more than the Polar Verity Sense. So in general, I think it's a mixed bag. If you want a good running results, you should use an external heart rate monitor. You could see that beside the running part, where I got really strange results of the satellite signal from the Polar Vantage V2, it was superior during the swimming and biking part, both in the GPS tracking and heart rate department. So who's the winner here? I can't really tell, since the Coros Pace 2 software is more convenient and it's a lighter and more comfortable watch to wear in such long competition. On the other hand, the Vantage V2 has performed better in every aspect besides GPS tracking while running. You can see that the Coros Pace 2 have calculated 1,256 calories burned, while the V2 has calculated 1,673, which was much closer to the actual number by the external heart rate monitor. Also, you get much more detailed breakdown of the energy used and other metrics in the Polar Flow app. Let me conclude it in that way. If you just need a triathlon watch that gets the job done and you don't want to spend too much on it, go for the Coros Pace 2. It's surely a viable and good option. If you're more sport data savvy and care more for the little details and have the cash to spend, the Vantage V2 is also a great option. Either one is not perfect, but it's also great in its own way. Anyway, to get an accurate heart rate data, you should use an external heart rate sensor such as the Polar Verity Sense. If you want to have more detailed look at each one of those watches, make sure that you'll check out my in-depth reviews of them both. I'll link the reviews down below. What about me and my personal experience? Well, it was an amazing one. I felt confident and was able to achieve my sub 2 hours goal. Of course that now I need to get a pair of proper road bike until the next event. I have about 3 months to do it. Also, I think it's a good idea to join a triathlon group to work on the nuances and improving the transition time, especially between swimming and biking. That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed my shared experience, from the sport aspect and the tech as well. Please share your opinion in the comment section down below. I will be more than happy to answer to all of your questions. Also, don't forget to leave a like and also consider subscribing to join this fitness and tech journey. Thank you for watching, and until next time, have a good one.